Dear friends from the Hellenic Center in London, I'm Jan Fitzsimpley and I teach linguistics at the University of Cambridge. I'm also a co-director of the Cambridge Center for Greek Studies. I would like to thank the Hellenic Center, first of all, for inviting me to give this presentation. It's one of a series of presentations that will be provided as part of the work that we do in Cambridge on several aspects of Greek language, literature, and culture. As I'm a linguist, my focus is on language, and in particular, I will present today a few aspects of Greek as a heritage language, some of which are supported by evidence from a recent research project on this topic. First of all, what makes a language a heritage language? Well, as you may guess, a language becomes a heritage language when it is spoken by individuals and families that live away from the country or the countries where this language is the majority language, the societal language. So Greek spoken outside Greece and Cyprus is a heritage, becomes a heritage language. And of course, moving out of Greece and Cyprus is the result of migration. And migration is a feature of the history of Greeks, as we know, for many centuries. During the last crisis, however, there were a lot of people who actually moved out from Greece that you can see on the graph that is presented on the left side of the slide. And you can see that more than 350,000 Greeks moved out of Greece during that last financial crisis. A large number of them moved to Germany, and the UK was the second destination, with many other destinations actually present in the list. Some estimates of the number of Greeks in the diaspora is between 5 and 7 million. I will focus on Greek migrant communities in Germany and the UK. But again, my focus is on heritage language support and education, rather than other aspects of perhaps social or economic aspects. So the only thing I want to say about these aspects is that the Greek community in the UK, which is around 70,000 individuals, consists of mostly middle to high socioeconomic status individuals, because 78% of Greeks living in the UK are university graduates. And in the literature on language development, bilingualism, multilingualism, and socioeconomic status, we take education levels to be used as a proxy for socioeconomic status. So the fact that 78% of Greeks that live in the UK are university graduates actually makes that proportion double that of that found of British graduates in the UK and Greek graduates in Greece. If we compare this to the Greeks in Germany, we will see that there we have a much more mixed profile in terms of education levels. And that is expected to a certain extent, because there were many more migrants, Greek migrants to Germany than to the UK. But it is something to keep in mind, because the higher the education level, we expect more support for heritage language development in the community. So we have seen what makes a language a heritage language, but who is a heritage speaker of that language, of Greek? This is a very complex question, in fact, and something that has not been completely resolved in the relevant literature. So I'm giving you 4 examples here of individuals that could be called heritage speakers of Greek, but I will leave it to you to decide whether all of them are or only some of them are. So Yannis is a 14-year-old boy who was born in Thessaloniki. He moved to the UK when he was 8 years old, and he didn't speak English at the time. He only spoke Greek. So since he arrived, he's been educated in an English-only state school in the UK, and he also attends an afternoon Greek language support class once a week. At the moment, he feels equally comfortable speaking both Greek and English, although different topics are easier for him to communicate in one of the two languages. Remember, Yannis was not born in the UK, so the question arises, is he a heritage speaker of Greek or not? Marietta is a 22-year-old girl who was born in London soon after her parents emigrated from Greece. Greek was her first language and the home language. But she was never educated in Greek, and she quickly became dominant in English. So she preferred to speak English and she felt more comfortable. Today, she says she does not speak Greek, and she obviously cannot do so without noticeable difficulty, but she understands Greek rather well. Is she a heritage language speaker of Greek? Petros is a 35-year-old man who was born in Southampton. His parents were second-generation immigrants from Greece, that is, they were also born in the UK. Greek and English were used as home languages, often mixed, but as soon as Petros started school, he preferred to speak in English. He can now communicate in Greek efficiently, and he uses Greek as often as possible. Is Petros a heritage speaker of Greek? Elena, who is 25, was born in New York. Her parents were first-generation immigrants from Greece, but they wanted Elena not to lag behind in her English, so they chose to use English as the home language, with a few Greek words and expressions used occasionally. Greek culture was very strongly present in Elena's household, but the Greek language was not. Elena is now, as an adult, trying to learn Greek to be able to communicate better with family back in Greece. I hope you can all realize that these are four very different contexts of heritage, Greek as a heritage language, and it's not clear that this variation can be accommodated and under the term heritage speaker of Greek. So as I said, this is a question that still remains open, and to some extent you can decide for yourselves who is a heritage speaker of Greek of all those. One thing that we know for sure is that they are all bilingual between Greek and English, but the proficiency in each language is different in each case. So this variation among heritage speakers is inevitable. One thing that we need to remember, though, is that heritage speakers are bilingual speakers. They have two languages, okay? And there is a lot of research that has been carried out on bilingualism and bilingual individuals. And this research has shown certain facts and has also talked about certain myths, which I'm going to discuss in a minute. Now, the facts about bilinguals that are most interesting and important is that you can grow up, first of all, you can grow up bilingual without having problems using each language with the right person in conversation. So you don't mix your languages unless you want to, and unless you know that the person who is listening to you can understand them both. So bilingual individuals are not confused individuals. It's also the case that bilinguals can learn how to read and write in both the languages they speak, and they can do so at a sufficiently high academic level if they have the right support and the right input. So both the heritage language, let's say the first language and the second language, can be learned in terms of reading and writing. Bilinguals also have an advantage over monolinguals in that they find additional language learning easier later in life. So they can learn a third or a fourth language with usually greater ease than a monolingual person. And finally, there is evidence that there are some bilinguals, not all bilinguals, but some bilinguals seem to do better than monolinguals in certain tasks that do not involve language, so certain cognitive tasks. And these tasks involve attention, how to focus on something, how to shift your attention to another topic in a more controlled way. But also they seem to do better than monolinguals in complex cognitive tasks that involve memory. And I will talk a little bit more about that. As I said a minute ago, there are certain myths about bilinguals. Okay. So some of these myths that I would like to talk about are the ones that you see on the slide here. So the first one is that if you are bilingual, using and developing your heritage or your first language will actually take away from the development of the second language, which is the important language, because that's the language you're going to use in the society. That is actually not true. Individuals can speak more than one language, and one doesn't seem to take away from the development of the other. They can develop all of them depending on how much input and support you have in each. The second, one of the other myths that has been shown in the literature is that when you use two languages with a child that has been diagnosed with a language problem or a communication problem or another cognitive deficit, that will be a further disadvantage to the child. So it has been the case in many countries and for many years that when a child was diagnosed with some sort of developmental language disorder, for example, or a communication disorder, the advice was to stop using two languages and just stick to one, usually the majority language, and therefore the heritage or the first language should be left aside. There is a lot of research that has been going on with children with such diagnosis, and it seems that there is no evidence whatsoever that growing up with two languages, even if you have a language impairment or a communication deficit, is going to disadvantage you further. In fact, there are studies that show that you will be better, let's say, better off having two languages rather than one. And finally, the last myth that I would like to argue against is that the idea that the benefits of bilingualism, whatever they may be linguistic, they may be cognitive or social, depend on how prestigious the combination of languages spoken is. So for example, if you speak English and French as bilingual, you have more advantages of any type, cognitive, social, or linguistic advantages, than if you speak English and a language that is not as prestigious or as well known as French. Okay, this is also a myth of bilingualism. And of course, usually in this case, it is the heritage language that is associated with how prestigious it may be. And this determines for parents and for children and when they grow up, which language they're going to use or support more. As a director of a project I did a few years ago, I have some results that I would like to share with you. In this project, we assessed over 500 bilingual children. I will focus only on the children here that had Greek as a heritage language. And these children lived in Germany, in the UK, in Albania, or in the US. But they differed a lot, not only in how proficient they were in Greek or in English, but they differed also in the type of school they attended. Okay, and it would be a school that would support Greek and the majority language, or just the majority language. So starting with Germany, heritage language education in Germany is actually quite well organized. I should say perhaps better organized than it is in the UK. It is supported and it is implemented through different educational policies. There are studies that show that educating children both in their heritage language and in German gives rise to positive academic outcomes for these heritage language students. So I'm just going to briefly present some ways in which heritage language support takes place in Germany. And there are three main programs that do so, and they all aim at maintaining and developing minority languages, heritage languages, along with German. The first one is called the Koala Program, so which is an acronym for coordinated literacy. In these schools that follow this program, literacy, that is learning how to read and write in both the heritage language, which could be Greek, and the school language, which is German, takes place. Okay, and there is a close collaboration between heritage language and German language teachers. Both languages are included in the classroom, and there are activities such as writing, singing, and rhyming that contribute to what we call intercultural learning, and that is very much supported. Now, the most interesting part is that this program has been evaluated, and there are academic outcomes that seem to be very positive. So these Koala students seem to achieve significantly higher scores in terms of their writing in German, in terms of the complexity of German grammar, compared to other heritage language speakers in Germany that go to German-only programs, that go to monolingual German schools. So these children actually seem to be doing better in German because they seem to have this heritage language support. They also seem to achieve something that is very hard to find, which is balanced bilingualism. That is the ability to use the two languages that you speak in many different contexts and also at a similar level. And finally, this program seems to promote high esteem of first language proficiency and competence. And of course, it makes multilingualism highly visible and something prestigious and something to aspire to. The second type of educational context we find in Germany is this bilingual school concept, which involves a cooperation of European primary schools. In these schools, a particular subject, usually a subject in social studies like history, geography, or religious studies, is taught in two languages, in the heritage language and in German. Now, what is particularly interesting about this type of schooling is that the children in the classroom are deliberately mixed in the sense that 1/3 of the class would be heritage language speakers, let's say Greek in our case. In the same class, you get 1/3 of children that have German as the first language, and they will learn Greek as a foreign language. And 1/3 of them would be bilingual between the two languages or between other languages, German and another language. There are additional lessons in this heritage language, 5 hours a week, on top of the use of Greek, in that case, to teach a particular subject. So the third type of schooling that we find in Germany is in comprehensive schools, comprehensive high schools, where they use the content and language integrated learning program. Now, these schools are schools where certain subjects are taught in the heritage language and certain other subjects are taught in German. The majority of hours of teaching is always in German, in the majority language. But subjects like history, geography, but also science could be in a language other than the majority language. In our case, it will be Greek. Now, these CLIL language immersion programs promote intercultural understanding, but interestingly, they allow the student to learn not only the language, in this case, a heritage language, but also a particular subject in that language. So a lot of the learning of the language becomes more implicit, more subconscious. There are more than 700 schools in Germany that offer CLIL in various forms. And there are studies that show that there have been linguistic and academic gains reported for students that attend this type of education. And apart from these school contexts in Germany, there are also afternoon language classes twice a week outside regular school hours, which are similar to our Saturday schools, let's say. These afternoon language classes exist in the UK as well as an option for heritage language support. And finally, there is another type of school in Germany where Greek is supported. This is a strong maintenance of bilingual setting school. These are Greek state schools in Germany, and the main medium of instruction is Greek. So all subjects are taught in Greek, but there is a considerable number of hours per week, 9 to 11 hours, where German is taught as a language. So examples of these are the Greek primary school in Düsseldorf or Wuppertal. Now, in that major project that I mentioned before, we managed to recruit children and assess children from 3 different types of schools in Germany. These are all children with Greek as a heritage language. Okay, these children are 10 to 12 years old and they live in Germany. The first group was from CLIL, so from a school in Krefeld where some subjects like mathematics, geography, history are taught in Greek, okay, 8 hours per week, and the rest of the schooling is in German. The second group that we looked at was the German dominant group. These children who are heritage speakers of Greek were in a school which was German only school, but they attended afternoon classes of Greek as heritage language, which was between 2 and 4 hours per week in total, which is very similar to what we find in the UK too. And the third group was the Greek dominant group. So these are children that go to Greek primary schools in Wuppertal, in Düsseldorf, and they have Greek as the main medium of instruction, but German language classes as well for quite a few hours per week. And what we tested them on a very large number of tasks, but here in this presentation, I'm only going to show you very few, in fact, 2 tasks only. So first of all, we tested them on their ability, on their vocabulary skills in both Greek and German. So we gave them pictures from standardized tasks on expressive vocabulary. The child has to look at the picture and name the object that they see. So what you see in the graph here is performance on German vocabulary, which is the red columns here of the graph, and the blue are the Greek vocabulary. And what you can see is basically that the 2 groups, the ones that go to the Greek CLIL school and the ones that go to the German only school, have similar vocabulary levels in both Greek and German is better than Greek, which is mostly what we expect for heritage language speakers. But what is really interesting here is that although these children have several subjects that are taught in Greek which is their heritage language, their performance is not actually different from the performance of children who are in a German-only school, which means that having certain subjects taught in the heritage language doesn't take away anything from your ability to develop the majority language too. When you compare these two groups with the children in the Greek, mainly Greek school, with 10 hours, let's say, of German per week, you see that their level of Greek vocabulary is much better than the other two groups, and their German is not as good, which is actually what you expect because of the type of schooling. So you can actually see that when it comes to the heritage language is very much supported in this context because there is what we call strong maintenance of the heritage language here. The difference between German in these children compared to these children is significant, but it's not something that they cannot catch up with, right? So overall, there seems to be a picture here that arises, which is based on how much, the quantity of exposure to the heritage language and the majority language that is reflected in these results. When we look at cognitive skills, however, and this is a task that you see here, which is on complex working memory, the picture is different. First of all, let me just say a few things about the task. In this task, what you have to do is press the J key on the keyboard when you see a number, in this case 5, which is the same as the number that you saw 2 digits back. Okay, so that's why it's called a 2-back task. Okay, so here you have to press the key because you see 2, which is the same as the digit you saw 2 numbers back. Okay, so that task is quite complex actually, and it shows not only how good your working memory is, but also how good you're updating, how quickly can you update the information in your brain, and also your capacity in terms of memory. Now, what we see in these results here from the 3 groups, again from the same schools, what we see is that it is only the children who are in this bilingual context, the Greek CLIL in Krefeld, that actually outperform, they perform better than the other 2 groups who are educated in German only or primarily Greek, and German is, let's say, just supported as a language. So these children who are learning different subjects in school in both the heritage language and the majority language seem to have better cognitive skills as they are found, in this particular type of complex memory task. So this is, let's say, good news and something to think about in terms of supporting the heritage language, not only as a language, but also as a means to develop academic abilities in different subjects. Now, in the US, and I'm going to say very few things about that, there is Greek heritage language support. There is a high emphasis on educating American-born generation, the second generation of Greek heritage speakers, particularly in reading and writing. And this is more of a revitalization program, let's say, of minority languages, one of which is Greek. There is a school in the US which is called the Socrates Academy, and we did some research there to see whether there are differences or similarities in these heritage language, Greek heritage language children compared to those that we saw in Europe. These children receive support in Greek and English, but the courses that they do in Greek include not only language, but mathematics and Greek culture. And one thing that we need to remember is that for these heritage language speakers, Greek is in fact not the language that is used at home. So this is second generation speakers, and they are not actually fluent in the language when they go to the Socrates Academy for schooling. Okay. So we compared some of these children who are Greek American. We compared their performance in certain tasks in Greek with the ones from the Greek primary school in London, where Greek is used as the main medium of instruction, but English language is also supported as in language classes. Now, one important difference between the London children and the American children is that the London children actually, most of them use Greek quite a lot at home, whereas, as we said, for the Greek Americans, this is not so much the case. It is mostly supported in school. So all these children were assessed on Greek vocabulary, which we saw before, what the task looked like, on that two-back task, the complex memory task. And we also tested them a little bit on their grammar. And to test them on their grammar, in Greek, we use the task which is called the sentence repetition task. And it looks like in the literature, it has been shown that asking somebody to repeat a sentence in a language which is, let's say, their second language or the third language, you can see what their proficiency level is, even though it is just seems a very simple task where you're presented with a sentence like η δασκάλα πρότεινε η άτακτη τάξη να μην πάει εκδρομή. So depending on your proficiency, you will be able to reproduce it, imitate that sentence verbatim, or you might leave out certain things if your proficiency is not so good. So we have used the sentence repetition task, which assesses both your word knowledge, but also your grammatical knowledge. It also is based on your memory. And what we found in this case is that when it comes to the cognitive task, there's no difference between the Greek Americans and the Greek English children. But when we look at grammar and vocabulary, we found that the children in London, in the primary school, are actually doing better than the children in the Socrates Academy. This is, however, not something to worry about, because this can be explained by the amount of, the number of hours that the children in London versus the children in the Socrates Academy are exposed to Greek, okay? But it's not just that. It's also the fact that for the London children, as I said, the majority actually use Greek at home, and Greek is supported at home a lot. So the heritage language is supported, whereas for the American children, this was more a program of revitalization of the heritage language. So to summarize, this aspect of my research has shown that supporting the heritage language through content subjects, so not just language classes, seems to improve children's academic literacy in two languages, which is called biliteracy. And it does not really take away from the academic skills they have in the majority language. So they can develop, let's say, two academic languages, not just have two oral languages, but you can also have two academic languages. Heritage language support through language use at home and together with support in the school setting promotes language abilities in more contexts, formal and informal. And thus it helps the heritage speaker become more of a balanced bilingual. And finally, what I want to say is that bilingualism alone is not enough to make you different in terms of cognition. So although the literature has shown that some bilinguals seem to do better, let's say, than monolinguals in certain tasks, this is not a finding that has always been replicated, no matter which bilingual populations we look at. there are several studies that actually don't find this advantage. And what my this research that I presented just a little part of shows is that it is not bilingualism alone that offers an advantage to heritage language children. It is the attempt to support the heritage language in the best possible way. So through not only oral support at home, but also through schooling, because that makes a difference in the quality and quantity of educational support that is offered to the heritage language speaker. And these are all crucial factors. So I would like to thank you very much for listening to this. And if you have questions, please contact me at my Cambridge address. Thank you very much.